Hi everyone, thanks for coming back for another video. This is going to be another chapter by chapter installment of one of the books in the Witcher series called The Last Wish. Okay, welcome to the confusing timeline that is The Witcher. I had a comment that suggested I do a comparison for this, and I was like, no way, it's way too complicated, but then I'm doing it. And I regret it. I have no idea what to say about this. We are in basically section 4. It's called A Grain of Truth. This is going to be a major spoiler alert for season 1 and actually season 2 now. You'll see why in a minute. So if you haven't watched the show or the series, or if you've watched the show and are just interested in the book, I mean, there are going to be some spoilers. So just beware. So there's not really a linear timeline of him leaving Neneka's Temple of Melitelli is what I'm going to call it. So we just have Geralt in the woods with his horse Roach, and he finds 2 dead bodies. Yay! It's a man and a woman. There's some graphic description of they're pretty bloodied up and gross, but he notices that he doesn't think wolves killed them. He thinks that wolves were feeding on them after another creature killed them. He notices a ring on the man's right hand that had the letter A. I think that's relevant. And he notices a rose on the woman's dress that was very dark blue, which is rare for roses in this world anyway. So he just kind of notices that that's what happened. He also kind of figures out, just from his own experience with this kind of thing, that they dismounted their horses. The man was killed. The woman ran. And then whatever attacked her kind of dragged her along the ground. And then the horses were gone. And he thinks it happened 2 or 3 days ago. So he's kind of evaluating, okay, what could have done this if it wasn't a wolf? He says he doesn't think it was a werewolf. Or something called a leshy, which I think we meet in season 2, season 3. So he's just kind of, he mentions a Kikimora, which we're familiar with from episode 1. So he's just kind of evaluating the scene. To make it even more confusing, each chapter is kind of broken into sub-chapters. There's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, just like in the middle of the text. So it's kind of like a scene within each story. These are short stories, but then some of them like string together, or all of them I guess eventually do. I don't know. His horse gets really uneasy, and I think it's so sweet, the relationship between Geralt and Roach, his horse. He makes a sign, it says the sign of Axia. I don't know why I'm doing this, like it's gonna do anything. These aren't the droids you're looking for. But he calms his horse down with a sign. He's like, it's okay. Easy, Roach, easy. Is it as bad as all that? It's just so wholesome. I love it. Oh, not for long. He realizes he's being watched, and animals are sensitive to this. I mean, the Witcher has enhanced senses, but, you know, the horse notices first. A girl was standing on the slope of the hill he had just climbed down. Her trailing white dress contrasted with the glossy blackness of her disheveled hair falling to her shoulders. She seemed to be smiling, but she was too far away to be sure. And Geralt just says hi to her. He's like, greetings. He took a step towards her. She watched him, her eyes black and enormous. The smile vanished. She ran down the slope like a deer. So I think she ran out of sight here. He calms down his horse again. And then he came to a gate, an iron gate, with a great brass knocker. I'm including these details on purpose because this scene is in the show. So I haven't rewatched it yet, so I want to go back and do that. So they come to this gate, and after a moment, Geralt just touches it because that's what you do, you know? And it opens. And he's like, whoa, not exactly. And there was nobody back there, just a courtyard. But, and Roach doesn't like it, but they went in. There's a fountain with a dolphin arched in it, which I only mentioned because it comes up later in this story. The fountain's not on, it's just full of leaves. And then he finds in this courtyard a rose bush with dark blue roses on it. So, all of a sudden, I don't know if this is the first they mention the mansion, but the mansion attached to this courtyard, all the windows and doors come open and something starts to rush at Geralt. Geralt draws his sword right quick, and the monster stops. The creature was humanoid and dressed in clothes which, though tattered, were of good quality and not lacking in stylish and useless ornamentation. He had a human body, but above it loomed a gigantic, hairy, bear-like head with enormous ears, a pair of wild eyes, and terrifying jaws full of crooked fangs in which a red tongue flickered like flame. The monster is just trying to get rid of him. It says, "Flee. Flee, mortal man." And Geralt's just kind of looking at him. So he's like, "I'll devour you, tear you to pieces." And it says the Witcher didn't move. Didn't lower his sword. Geralt's just kind of like looking at him. "Are you deaf? Away with you. Clear off while you're still in one piece. Because if you don't, then..." And then finally Geralt talks and it's like, "Then what?" He's such a badass. Geralt says, "Are we going to carry on just like standing around, standing like this?" And the creature says, "What do you suggest instead? Lying down?" Geralt's kind of like not sure what's going on at this point, but he's definitely like toying with it instead of like showing any fear of this creature. The monster says, "What do you want here? How did you get here?" And Geralt's just like, "I got lost." Which is obviously BS. And finally the monster's kind of like, okay, so you're not scared of me? And Geralt's like, "Should I be?" I mean, they did just threaten each other, or I guess the monster threatened him first, basically, but he gets invited in for a glass of water, basically. He lifted his hairy paw, all the shutters clattered against the wall once more, and deep in the dolphin's stone gullet something rumbled. So he's definitely got some magic ways about him. Geralt asks if he lives alone, and the monster says, "Why do you want to know?" Basically, I'm summarizing. The interior was in need of extensive repair, although it was reasonably clean and tidy. The furniture had been made by skilled craftsmen if a very long time ago. A pungent smell of dust hung in the dark rooms. The monster just says the word light, and all the torches light up. It's pretty cool. Geralt says, "Not bad."
That's not a bad trick.
They take a look at Geralt's medallion, which is in the show as well. It's a, silver, I don't know if it's silver. It's a chain with a silver colored, it's got a wolf on it. But they're just kind of curious about each other and like chit-chatting. Geralt's definitely like in charge of himself, but the monster's kind of like, what is this person? They agree that they could both, have something to eat, and the monster just slaps his paws down on the table and food appears.
Roast venison, sage truffles, sweet wine, and lots of it!
The monster asks for Geralt's name, and he says Geralt, and then he says, "In your name, dear host," and this is a confirmation that this character is Nivellen. At least that's how I'm gonna say it. I think that's how they say it in the show. Nivellen. Nivellen? Nivellen?
Geralt! Nivellen?
I'm gonna hate myself if I say it 80 times wrong, but I will do my best. So Nivellen, that's what I'm gonna call him, is in the show, but I believe he's in season 2, episode 1. Whereas this is the 4th chapter in the first book. Ciri is not with him in here. Ciri isn't even in the story yet. Whereas she's with Geralt when they go and have this Nivellen scene. So, no Ciri, just Geralt, just happened to randomly, come across this creature. Now, in the show, Geralt does hint that he's known Nivellen for a while. So at first I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be the first scene that they have an adventure together. You'll see. So after they introduce themselves, they get into a conversation about, why Nivellen is like this. And he says, he calls the mansion a trap. It says, he doesn't really know how it happened, but the house just does whatever he wants. And Geralt says, how long have things been like this? And he says, 12 years. Geralt asks how it happened, and he's kind of like, mind your own business. And Geralt's just like, okay. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just asking out of curiosity. I don't know if Geralt's trying to just tease him or, calm him down a little bit and be like, look, it's not all that serious. I'm really not scared of you. It comes up that, Nivellen obviously used to be human. He doesn't really know what Geralt is either, so Geralt says he's a witcher. Nivellen asks him, okay, who sent you then? Who sent you to deal with me? Once he learns that witchers kill monsters. Geralt is honest and says, no, I just kind of happened upon this place. Nivellen says, how much of the rumors about witchers is true? And Geralt says, practically nothing. Geralt comes to the conclusion that Nivellen is not really a monster. He's not the bad guy that needs to be slain, at least. Geralt points out that you're not a monster, otherwise you wouldn't be able to touch the silver tray, and in no way could you hold my medallion. Geralt explains that this must have all happened because of a spell. He says, I'm sure you know who cast that spell, and tells him that it could be uncast. But Nivellen says, I don't want you to break the spell. Interesting. Nivellen likes to say pox on it a lot, but I just don't feel the need to read that verbatim, but he says it like constantly. Nivellen starts to tell like the story of his history, his father, his grandfather. Nivellen talks about a situation when he was young where they robbed a temple, which is interesting because we were just learning about the temple of Militelli. I don't think it was that, though. I don't think they actually could have done that, but there was a woman there who unconsensually was kind of put in a position where she allowed him, Nivellen, to become a man, and then cursed him. So, you go, girl. She screamed something, that I was a monster in human skin, that I'd be a monster in monster skin. Something about love, blood, I can't remember. She must have had the dagger, a little one, hidden in her hair. She unalived herself. A few days later, I woke up, and as the servants saw me, they screamed. Even the parrot was afraid of him. People either, like, he was in a rich person's house at that time, and people either fled or, like, literally dropped dead. And Nivellen just kind of talks about, like, how horrifying it was to, like, have this happen, but also, like, going through this kind of sudden loss and, I guess, like, lifestyle change. He talks about a situation where he looked out the window and saw trespassers stealing one of the blue roses. They were blue roses from Nazaire. Sure. His grandfather's roses, basically. So he went outside and tried to scare the guy away. The guy was just like, I just wanted some roses for my daughter. She's 8. And then he stops and looks at Geralt, I guess, and says, are you laughing? Geralt says, no. It's just a funny moment, like, in between these, like, serious ones. Nivellen felt sorry for the trespasser guy and invited him in. Then it starts to get a little sinister. He had a pretty large bag ready with him, and a daughter, also pretty large. I came to an understanding with the merchant. He'd leave her with me for a year. I had to help him load the sack onto his mule. He wouldn't have managed it by himself. Geralt asks about the girl, and Nivellen says she had fits at the sight of me for a while. She just kind of got used to it. Nothing bad happens to her, luckily, though, and then she just leaves after a year. And Nivellen's really upset, so he looks for another one. The next one was named Fene, and she wasn't frightened of him at all. The two of those kind of made a game out of, like, frightening people away from the mansion. She stayed with him for a year. The next one, Primula, was the daughter of an impoverished knight. I think he's paying them to have the girls stay there. She wasn't scared either. So Nivellen's kind of okay as this monster, so he's kind of, like, getting over the idea of, like, I need to change back. There were 2 girls after Primula, Ilka and Venemira. I may have missed this, but somehow he believed that a virgin's kiss would transform the way he looked. But then that didn't work or something. Nivellen's trying to convince us that, like, this was good for the girls and good for him. But he says, like, he still has enemies from his father and grandfather, and Geralt's kind of like, are you sure nobody else was trying to kill you? Because, you know, you're a monster. Kinda. You look like one. But he suspected someone had paid me to kill you. Who would have? A scoundrel who wanted the contents of my cellar but didn't have any more daughters. Nivellen assures him that there was nobody else, but remember, Geralt saw that girl on the top of the hill. Nivellen assures him that there's nobody else, but then after a moment of, like, back and forth, he says, you know perfectly well that I don't live alone. And Geralt says, I saw her in the forest. She's the reason, it turns out, why merchants and daughters have been leaving here empty-handed. They kind of leave it at that, and Geralt's like, okay, I guess it's time for me to be on my way. And then Geralt kind of retcons and explains what he thinks happened. You had some bad luck. Of all the temples in Galibol and the Nimnar Valley, you picked the Church of Coram Ach Terra, the lion-headed spider. Okay. In order to lift the curse thrown by the priestess of Kuram Achtera, you need knowledge and powers which I don't possess. He's just giving him information at this point. He doesn't want to say exactly why he doesn't want to be changed back. Geralt asks him, like, have you ever had muddy feet after waking from a dream? You know, or like pine needles. Like, he thinks he's sleepwalking and making, like, maybe he's causing those deaths. They're just kind of hinting at it at this point. And then Geralt starts to leave. So Nivellen is out, you know, with Geralt on Roach again, or with Roach, and he's talking about animals that liked him. They might have run away, but then they came back. There was a cat that gave him company. And then he says Vereena too, and then stops himself. And Geralt's like, does she like cats too? And he says, birds. He just gave himself away, right? He says, I gave myself away, pox on it. She isn't another merchant's daughter, Geralt, or another attempt to find a grain of truth. We love each other. If you laugh, I'll sock you one. Geralt didn't laugh, though, and he says, you know your Vereena is probably a Rusalka. Which is the first time I'd heard of that monster that I know of. Nivellen's kind of like, yeah, I suspected as much. And Geralt kind of puts together, oh, okay, Rusalkas are afraid of people, and if you love her, you think you love each other, and you become human, then Rusalka goes away. And as Geralt's about to leave, Nivellen says, hang on a minute. Are you here because something happened to a villager? He said someone was here with his daughter. He told the house to shut itself up. The girl picked a rose and pinned it to her dress, which is who Geralt found in the beginning. And they left. But the chapter's not over. Geralt just spends the night in the forest. Although Nivellen told him not to, but he just does. I mean, he's Geralt. He can do what he wants. He heard some strange noises, howling and singing, and a sound which could only have been the screaming of a tortured woman. At light, he went back to kind of investigate where he heard the sound, and there was just charred bones. In the next subchapter, which happens to be subchapter 4, Roach is upset again, and they notice some kind of ring formed by the caps of reddish mushrooms peering from the moss. So, something mysterious in the woods. And Geralt's like, ugh, Roach, you're smarter than I am, and they start to turn back. This is subchapter 5. Roach is pretty upset, and Geralt couldn't calm her down with a sign, so they're getting closer to something sinister. He heard singing once they got back to the mansion. The singing stops real quick, and Geralt sees the singer. She was clinging onto the back of the dolphin in the dried-up fountain, embracing the moss-overgrown stone with her tiny hands, so pale they seemed transparent. Beneath her storm of tangled black hair shone huge, wide-open eyes the color of anthracite. Okay. Geralt kind of feels that something's off and stops to draw his sword. He warns her, it's silver. This blade is silver. You're so like a Rusalka that you could deceive anyone. But the horses are never mistaken. Geralt seems to do this a lot so far. He kind of gives the backstory, just like all the information we need to understand what's going on. He says, Nivellen attracted you with that shape of his, didn't he? You evoked his dreams. I can guess what sort of dreams they were, and I pity him. Where is he, black-haired one? You were singing, so you've drunk some blood. He says, you've taken the ultimate measure, which means you haven't managed to enslave his mind. Am I right? And she nods. Very creepy. He tries to guess what kind of monster she is, and she, like, shakes her head. So finally we get, you know, that typical horror trope moment where he's like, that means you're... And, like, I guess her mouth flies open. Maybe she's got white spiky fangs in there. And he says, you're a Bruxa. Which I guess is a kind of vampire, because then it says the vampire jumped up, arched her back like a leopard, and screamed. And this is in the show, too, this creature, and it is Vereena. And it manages to, like, throw Geralt back just from this scream. He makes a sign. But it was, like, a really, like, hard throw. On the dolphin's back, in the stone circle, where a dainty girl was in a white dress that had just sat a moment ago, instead an enormous black bat flattened its glossy body, opened its long narrow jaws wide, revealing rows of needle-like white teeth. This was in the show as well. It just wasn't until season 2, and Ciri was with them and had something to do with this. Geralt threw a sign at the bat. There's fighting. There's some mind games going on too, because Geralt's like hearing things that aren't there. He manages to get a hit on her with the silver sword. The wailing Bruxa was morphing on the dolphin's back, and she turns into the girl-like figure with the white dress, and there's some blood on her. But it was a hard hit apparently, and didn't do nearly as much damage as Geralt thought it would. Geralt tells her to shout, scream your guts out, lose your strength, and then I'll slash your pretty little head off. He starts to hear her voice in his mind. The Bruxa's lips didn't move, but the Witcher heard the words clearly, and she's talking about killing him. Nivellen appears out of nowhere and says, Vereena, like calls her. So obviously this is Vereena that he had mentioned, but there's a little more sinister stuff to it than just being another girl that shows up at his mansion. So Nivellen it seems like he's actually trying to calm her down and like get control of her, but she starts screaming at him too, throwing him around. She turns towards Nivellen, and Nivellen forced the sharp broken end of a 3-meter long pole in her chest. And just like in the episode, she takes the stake and starts to like shove it through herself and get closer and closer. It is so creepy. Perfect horror trope kind of situation. She gets all the way up to where Nivellen's head is and grabs it. Geralt comes up and just kind of slices her head off. Then he has a small, like, midlife crisis. Is he midlife? I don't think so. But he just has all these questions. I think they're coming from the Bruxa's, like, mind, because that's part of what she was doing with Nivellen was mind control. Geralt goes over to Nivellen and says, here, get up. And Nivellen finds that he is no longer a beast. He's trying to convince him to come back to the horse. He has medicine. Like, they're both pretty beat up at this point. Nivellen's upset about Vereena, but Geralt's a good friend, actually, and says, don't look, let's just go the other way. Nivellen kept touching his face with his free hand. Incredible, Geralt. How many years? How is it possible? But Geralt tells him there's a grain of truth in every fairy tale, like Nivellen previously believed about a virgin's kiss, but Geralt says love and blood, they both possess a mighty power. It has to be true love. So we got everything in this chapter, man. We've got a horror story, we've got a love story, we've got a Beauty and the Beast spin-off, we've got a Witcher and a really sassy monster. I really enjoyed that episode. I think there was something more sinister about Nivellen in that episode, so it was kind of like they weren't friends by the end, but in here they were still friends by the end. Maybe there's more scenes with him. Again, I don't remember exactly. Maybe I will when I get there. But yeah, that is the 4th chapter, or section 4, depending on what you want to call it and how you want to count those little tiny chapters. It was called A Grain of Truth. I really enjoyed it. And I guess people who had read the books before the show, maybe they were happy to have seen it on screen finally, even though it was a little late and a little different with Ciri there. But I mean, there was the situation of like, having a young girl stay with him for a year or whatever, like it kind of makes sense. So I'll rewatch it, maybe record a little bit more about that because it's been a while since I've seen that episode. Hey everyone, I have fully committed to the unprepared vlog style of this series because that's my dirty room. I just spent 20 minutes trying to get a shot where I didn't look like an evil Joker or something. I also want to draw attention to these earrings. The woman who makes them is called Bricks with Friends. I think it's a woman. These are awesome, and they aren't just like Lego people with a hook on it. I think she painted these and they would move and stuff. It's amazing. I also have a Bob Ross shirt on and a doll that I took pictures with. I'm a little overboard. Okay, so I realized, and the whole reason I'm just slapping this together is because I didn't explain anything that happened with, I think they say Nivellen, because now I've watched the show. I'm still going to say Nivellen because that's what I did consistently. Obviously my look today is a bit extra, but I tried to get on the Bob Ross theme. So I watched the show, and even though I'm focusing on what the book has, because this is a book summary, I'm still going to tell you what happens in the show just to kind of compare a little bit. The show starts with an unknown family. It's a man, a woman, and a child, a teenage child. And they die by an invisible enemy. I guess it's supposed to be the flying Bruxa. I can tell you that now because you've watched the book part. The book starts with Geralt finding these dead people. And I know they're the dead people because he does find them later in the episode, but that's not how it opens. They switch back and forth again with what's going on with Yennefer, what's going on with the mages, but none of that is in the book at this point. It could be happening in the same timeline as the show, but I don't know that yet, and it's not in the book. Also, Ciri is with him in the show. This is episode 1 of season 2, and he just met Ciri, so I believe he's trying to bring her to Kaer Morhen, but they end up at Nivellen's house. Instead of the people in the beginning, he finds a deer carcass. Roach does get upset and he does calm her with a sign, and he explains that to Ciri. I completely forgot that he did that, but now that I read it in the book, I appreciate that they put that in there. He does something to the deer, like he tastes the blood or something, I don't know, and he gets concerned, obviously, worried, but he doesn't explain it. They keep going on Roach, and he sees an empty village. He already knows Nivellen at this point and purposefully goes to his house. They do explain in a little bit later in the episode, how they knew each other, but in the book, he's meeting Nivellen for the first time. He calls him an old friend. The house shutters and everything's still open, and Nivellen still does jump out, but Geralt knows who he is, and they recognize each other pretty quickly. Once we go inside, Nivellen still has the magical, powers to bring things about. He offers a bath to both of them. For some reason, they have a bath scene with Ciri. I'm not sure if that's trying to, establish anything about her personality. But while she's in the bath, she hears weird noises in the ceiling, and a white dress appears for her to change into once she's done. Geralt declines the bath, even though it's implied that he could really use one. They have a dining room scene. Nivellen just conjures the food, and it falls down in front of them, and Ciri has a great reaction to it. It's kind of really funny. They have banter between him and Geralt, and that's a lot like the book. It's supposed to be humorous. And Ciri joins in. She can keep up with them. And Geralt kind of points out that, she's tougher than she looks, she's cool. And Ciri, I think, really appreciates that. And it's one of the first times that an adult has, validated her ability to survive, I think. I haven't watched, from episode 3 to the end of season 1 yet. We haven't rewatched, but we'll see. Nivellen says that it's been 13 winters since he last saw Geralt, and then there's a scene that's completely not in the book that they say is how they first met. There was a wyvern infestation, which is a type of dragon, basically, and Nivellen's father, who's not a good person, hired Geralt to deal with it. Nivellen was trying to kill one and fell into their lair of the dragons. Geralt saves him by killing one of them. But then he gives the head to Nivellen to come out and tell his dad, I killed one. To try to make Daddy proud. And Daddy's proud, but apparently that's one of the last times his dad gave him any validation. And just like in the book, Geralt doesn't know what caused the curse yet that made him a beast and gave him these magical powers, I'm assuming. Like in the book, Nivellen says that he did go in and attack or trash a temple, and I think it's the one that's in the book, but the words are so weird that I'm not sure. I think they did mention it, and he says that the priestess of the temple cursed him. He doesn't say why yet. Just like in the book, Geralt wants to cure him and offers help, I guess. Nivellen says that the lady who cursed him yelled something about love and blood. He also creates this thing where he tried to unalive himself, but he kept coming back. So I guess this curse includes not being able to escape it at any cost. Later, Geralt and Nivellen are hanging out, and he asks about the village being empty. For the first time, they mentioned the Wild Hunt, but we don't really know anything about that yet. It's very important. I still don't know exactly what it is, but that's much later on. The village being empty, Nivellen at this point, I just said Nivellen, blames it on the Battle of Sodden, which is something that Yen and Tissaia, and there was this huge mage battle All the politics are not in the story, so I'm not even going to go into it right now. Ciri tries to say something about the Wild Hunt as well, but Geralt just like brushes it off real quick, like he's trying to make her not say it. So clearly he's keeping some things from Nivellen. I also love the line Geralt says where he's like, I've lived through 3 ends of days. It's all horseshit. And it kind of made me feel better about the current situation we're all in here. Ciri asks if he has a cat. The cat is in the book, or at least mentioned in the book. And Nivellen says, yeah, I have a cat, and her name is Vereena. We know from the book that that is the monster. They kind of don't believe him, though. Like, both of them don't really believe him about the cat. So, Geralt decides to go, like, scout the area and just kind of make sure it's safe. But Ciri stays with Nivellen, and they play with this weird, like, light casting thing that's really cool. Geralt has a whole conversation with Roach. It's fantastic. In the show, while Ciri is spending time with Nivellen, he tells Ciri that he hopes there's a grain of truth to the fairy tales about how he might be cured. And that's how they get the episode name and the chapter name, Grain of Truth. Nivellen fills Ciri in instead of Geralt in the show about, you know, some of the stuff that we're wondering about in the show. It's good for storytelling, but it's kind of out of order from what it is in the book. He says his statues in the gardens are his servants that he killed when he didn't know his own strength, like right after he was cursed and turned into a beast. Ciri says she doesn't think he's a monster, and that's something that Geralt says in the book too. Ciri goes to bed. There's a new scene with Geralt outside, and he sees footprints through the snow. He follows them, and all of a sudden, they disappear. They just stop. At this point, the footprints are just kind of like a situation. He doesn't panic about it yet. There's a knife throwing scene back in the mansion. Geralt is throwing knives at a picture of Nivellen's father. Nivellen is also throwing them. And anytime someone misses, they have to tell the truth. Well, Geralt happens to miss every time. It turns out later on that Nivellen cursed the knives and they wouldn't hit the target because Geralt pulls out a knife of his own and throws it and it goes right onto the head. But he plays along and tells the truth. And Nivellen kind of throws some shade at Geralt and he's like, have you told Ciri yet that they turn children into witchers? And like, how? Geralt says that's not going to happen to her. They find out about the magic knives and like that's basically the end of the scene. Ciri is going to bed, but she's kind of talking to herself and to the cat, saying, like, you're going to be safe. You know, like, stuff like that. That's just kind of represents how she might be feeling. And like, there's a bit of relief, but a bit of danger as well. So then we get the best monster scene. Like, Vereena crawls out of the ceiling like the ring girl thing, like with her head joints and all like crazy. It's so creepy and perfect. She climbs onto Ciri eventually. I guess Ciri's asleep all of a sudden, and they talk. For a moment, they're able to talk telepathically, which is a special thing. Ciri somehow instantly knows, I don't think it has to do with Vereena, but she like instantly knows that Vereena and Nivellen love each other. It's just kind of weird how it comes out. And then Vereena kisses Ciri's hand and she just instantly falls asleep. So obviously Vereena has some magic as well. I mean, she's a monster and she's like totally creepy, so of course. Geralt isn't sleeping or like, he's just like paying attention constantly to danger. As he's patrolling now, he finds the corpses of the guy and his daughter, just like he does in the first part of the chapter. He sees more footprints that disappear, but this time he realizes this thing flies. It jumps to a scene with Ciri. I think he just like busts into her room and tells her there's a Bruxa. He drinks one of his potions and becomes, you know, like that black-eyed effect that they have in the show. That's the first time that Ciri sees it. And then they have a great kind of horror trope scene with him in the hallway, like prowling down, and it's creepy and scary. He finally hears some weird sounds, and he goes into a room, and Nivellen is on the floor, and the Bruxa is on top of him doing vampire stuff, okay, drinking his blood. And it looks to Geralt like she's attacked him. So he tries to interrupt. She gets up and screams, and it pushes him across the room. She goes up into the ceiling and he ends up like stabbing her through that. It's a little bit different of a fight scene. Okay, I forgot the part where Geralt tells Ciri to like go get Roach and like, I don't know if he tells her to leave or just stay or what. They do have a conversation later on where he's like, when I say run, you run. And she agrees in the end. But she witnesses this whole fight. The Bruxa flies through the window. Ciri's already out there. So Geralt ends up out there as well. When she comes through the window and lands in the snow, though, she looks like her normal self, not her monster self. So Ciri is sympathetic and goes over and touches her, like every horror trope, like, why? Geralt makes his way outside because he knows the monster's out there. He tells Ciri, like, go back to Roach, this is the Bruxa. And she turns back into, like, her weird, creepy, joint, distended monster self and screams at Geralt again. Geralt does a sign and throws the scream back at her. She turns into the bat, which I guess is a vampire lore kind of thing, but they call it a Bruxa. I don't know if that's, like, Polish word for anything. In between these, like, knockouts, Vereena is still trying to get Ciri to, like, trust her, I guess. Like, she's putting up a different personality to Ciri than she is to anybody else. She's trying to get, I don't know if she's trying to get sympathy or just, like, a friend, you know? There's some really impressive shots of Geralt, like, turning the sword on the bat. Like, he does, like, this underarm, like, sword hit thing. It's really cool. When he hits her, as a bat, she falls down into the snow and she's naked this time. Ciri is still being sympathetic and she goes to like cover her because she's naked. Vereena at this point turns on Ciri. She grabs Ciri in a chokehold and threatens her. All of a sudden, there's a spear thrust right through her. They use her hair to cover her nakedness, so it's not, I mean, it's horror and bloody and everything. So it's an R-rated scene. All right, and then she does this creepy thing that happens in the book. She turns her head around and pulls the spear further into her. I forget if she turns her head around in the book, but the spear thing, like, coming through her is the same, and Nivellen is the one with the spear. She starts to try and scream her way, you know, at Nivellen, but then Geralt comes up from behind and chops her head off. It flies through the air just like it does in the book. The dismembered head looks at Ciri and gives her this, like, creepy warning, and it bursts into flames. When we look back at Nivellen, he's no longer a beast. He's a dude. He's actually the guy that plays Tormund in Game of Thrones, and, like, he voices that character. I think they may have used prosthetics, actually. It's pretty amazing. So then we get some backstory about it. Nivellen says that he found Vereena in the woods, starving. She wasn't scared of him, and when she healed, she chose to stay even though he was a beast. It's like a Beauty and the Beast thing. She was already a Bruxa, though. There's not much information on that, and he consensually let her feed on him. I guess maybe that's why they say he couldn't, like, off himself, because he would come back, so, like, I guess it didn't matter if he lost a lot of blood. The downside is that Vereena, you know, she is a monster and she couldn't control herself, and she's the one that ended up killing that couple that Geralt finds both in the book and the show. And we start to find out some not so great things about Nivellen. It kind of changes our impression of him, unfortunately, because he's a great character. But he, like, just let her kill people. Like, he didn't do anything about it. Just turn his beastly head away, I guess. They talk about the love and blood sacrifice like they do in the book. Like, that's what was able to turn Nivellen back into a dude. But then he reveals that he didn't just attack the temple and the priestess cursed him. He R-worded her. And we have to say things like that for YouTube, but also for trigger warnings and stuff. Like, I don't want... This is pretty intense stuff, okay? So, like, it's gonna be like that. So don't come at me. Geralt and Ciri have, I think, like, in the book, they do, that does happen, but Geralt's the only one present, and he kind of, it's more like, well, that was a long time ago, and you were a stupid kid, and you had bad parents, and all this stuff. Like, it wasn't really addressed, but in the show, it's a reveal, and Geralt and Ciri are all of a sudden, like, disgusted with him. He begs Ciri to stay, I think, or maybe he's just begging her to, like, forgive him. But it gets really creepy really fast. Geralt and Ciri are like, screw this, we're out, and start to leave. Nivellen begs Geralt to slay him, and Geralt says, do it yourself. He's pissed. And that's rightly so. I mean, it was a long time ago, but like, I don't know. There was always this kind of back and forth with the banter and everything. I think they developed that relationship well, and I think they handled that material well, even though there were some differences. I mean, when they're merging the timelines, you kind of have to have, you know, it's mostly Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri, so it's like you have to have those three in your show. So it makes sense that they put Ciri there for the show's sake. At the end, they're in the woods together, and he kind of comes out of his black eye witcherness. What is on? Oh, this is swatches. That's not a bruise. I was like, what happened to my arm? They have a dad moment between Geralt and Ciri, and that's it. So I wanted to include the show info just because we're talking about this scene and this chapter and this whatever in this video. So I hope that's helpful. I hope it's helpful to future me to like look back on what the differences were, because sometimes that comes up. Let me know if you like this kind of content. If not, I understand. But subscribe, because there's a lot of different things we do here. We're art and animals. And this is definitely art related. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. Witcher series of The Last Witch. I can find it. You know, also the book, because they're all kind of, he also kind of, you know, Sherlock's the scene. I don't know. Glossy blackness of her lacking in stylish stuff. It's a, you know, necklace, basically. It's a chain with a round silver colored round. What did I just say? Believe he's in season 2 though, chapter 1, and in the show, chapter 1. I'm not comfortable here, guys. Alright. I believe he's in series or season or whatever. Can I just talk, please? Alright. I'm gonna try to go quicker because this is driving me crazy. Even the parrot was scared. And Neville. Oh, why did my back hurt immediately when I started filming? So they had some sort of like without, am I completely like not in the middle of the shot here? Oh my god, what is going on? This is bad. If you want to do YouTube, you cannot be a perfectionist, or you cannot be one for everything. About feels responsible for well, my under eye bags are like in the wrong light. They really look bad. It's fine. Oh, I heard a weird sound. It's probably my snake pooping. 46 freaking minutes.